All right, so good evening everyone. So it's 7:30, so we could start. Some of you would mention that you could not make it today, so I'm assuming that the recording is something that you could have access to. So quick question, so were you able to access the previous recording I sent just to make sure that it's working? Anybody, did you actually take a look at the recording before? Was it clear? I think I posted it through YouTube, huh? Yep, perfect. All right, so it's working. Fantastic. And were you also able to get the articles that I said? As I said, every time we have a conversation, I think there could be articles that quickly spring to my mind. And the last time there were some that I sent it across. So hopefully you've received those articles too. Yeah, so great. Quick question. So are you okay with me sending it by email? Because I am posting it on Canvas, but a lot of times I'm still new to Canvas. I'm still trying to figure out how it works, how to make it publicly available, but I would rather also email it to you as well. So hopefully that's okay with everyone. So my apologies if there's too much of my emails coming in, but hopefully the content will be more than making up for all that as well. So essentially what I want to do right now is that I will quickly tell you how I plan to grade your paper. So essentially I will be sending, after this conversations, after today's session, I will be sending a very short Word document that sort of gives you an idea about what I will be looking at in your first assignment. Again, needless to say, it is pretty much what I also mentioned in my PowerPoint, but this is more in detail as well. So you can just take a look at it. And most of you, all of you, one of the things which I expect all of you to do is to actually take a look at the papers, at least in this assignment, do a reflection, and there's a lot of questions out there that most of you have. So what I want to try and do is that I'm going to make sure that I answer all of those questions, but what I would like to do, if it's okay with all of you as well, is, well, I will give you feedback, and today I'll give a chance for every one of you to ask at least one question from the assignment that you did. What I'll always do is that at the end, towards the end of the semester, what I'll try to do is that have one-on-one phone calls with you, and make sure that I answer each and every one of your questions from each of your assignments. Is that something that's okay with you? So that I can have one call with every one of you individually, and then what I can then do is that we can have a kind of a debrief of all the questions that you have. Needless to say, when I give you feedback on your assignments, I will give you some of my thoughts on it, but of course, what I would also like to do, if there's an interest from your side, is have a one-on-one, and by that time what we can do is that with all of your assignments, you'll have a list of questions, and then we could actually have a discussion on that, and I will do it personally. So hopefully that's okay, because otherwise, if you want to do it after every assignment, that could be pretty time consuming, but I could just block some time and have a chat with all of you as well. So how long should we plan on the discussion? Maybe an hour, because it depends upon the questions. I'm not saying that you need to have the discussion, but I think one of the key things that I'm hoping that you would take away from this class, as well as with all the assignments, is yes, you do the assignment, but maybe all of you have specific questions that you have and saying, how would this apply to my organization? What are your thoughts on this? And if you want to have a discussion on that one, then I could give you my thoughts on it as well. So that's pretty much why. So you can decide whether you want to have that discussion or not. But the idea is that it's more like over and beyond what is expected. So again, only if you want it. So I will send out an email more towards the end of June, asking you for a time when that would work for us to have a call, and that could be at your convenience. Well, I'm assuming that I also have free time at that point in time, but we could also have, that's a kind of your overall takeaway from the class as well. Yes, Randy, yes, I'm not that old where I do not know that the thumbs up is a great emoji, so, but it's great. So what I'm going to do right now is that I'm going to throw the floor open. Bob, I hope you can hear us better now, but others, I guess you're able to listen to me as well. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to throw it open to each and every one of you, And I want to ask you this question. So what were your key thoughts when you read both the papers that I'd assigned? So it's, again, just some thoughts, and I'm going to go with Alexis if you're signed on. So if you could just unmute yourself and give me some of your thoughts that went through your mind when you read both the papers.
Hi.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the first article about the the shrinking core, expanding the periphery one.
Yeah.
Because that really relates to what my company kind of is.
Yeah.
Because I work for a distributor, a liquor distributor, to be more specific. So we deal with all those kind of aspects on different levels each time. So it was just kind of, a really big eye opener of how my company operates and how they use those pretty much every single day.
Yeah, indeed. And what were your thoughts about the other one?
I liked the other one. I couldn't relate to it as much as I could relate to the first one, just because, like I said, I'm a distributor. I sell a product that's given to my company. So I don't really have a huge customer relationship as far as that goes. But, moving forward, I definitely see how all of that stuff is really valuable as far as customer intimacy goes.
Okay, good. So that's okay. So I'll try to give you my take on why I assigned those two articles, but I just want to listen to the key takeaways from every one of you as well. Great. Thanks, Alexis.
Yeah.
Brock? Yeah, Brock.
All right, you got me. There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was a little quick on the button. I kept remuting. They were both interesting, right? The first one, some of my major takeaways were I thought it was interesting that it talked about solution sales as kind of a I guess path toward that customer relationship moving up to the ownership bucket. That's certainly key, but I think sometimes businesses will feel as though the solution sale is of their own crafting, right? So we fail to integrate the customer when we're coming up with what we believe to be the solution.
Yeah.
And that was my key takeaway on the second article too, right? So
Indeed.
So I talked a lot about the integration between the two.
Yeah.
And that's a big component, especially in that customer intimacy. We think we're listening and we're really not, right?
Yeah.
And we're building something that we think the customer wants when they're moving in a whole other direction. That is maybe the one defining factor of the industry I'm in.
But let me ask you this question. Oh, sorry, bro. So let me ask you this question though. But there are a lot of times when the customers do not necessarily know what they want as well, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So in that case, yeah.
Yeah, and that was a question of mine too, was kind of how we interact with that and what's that happy medium to provide them with a new solution to their problem, but we tend to not address their problem. So an example I used was customers want to plan faster. Okay, so they want to put the seed in the ground as quick as they can. Well, we'll build a wider planter, right? So now you get up to a 32-row planter. Well, customers farming next to a river, no, I want a small planter that will move faster, right? So you think you're listening, and you're not, right? So truly being in touch with the customer, and reaching that ownership phase where they're included in the process and the design and all of that is absolutely imperative to meeting the true need they have instead of what they're voicing.
Okay. Good. Thanks, Brock. So McKenna.
So for me, it was a little bit interesting because everything I do with work is directly customer related. So we don't do a lot of third party interaction, at least on the membership side of the hotel. So everything is about building the relationship. And for us, our biggest way of ensuring a sale is we have to get the customer on property, because what we're selling isn't a product that we send to them. It's the physical hotel and them using it. So it was for those types of parts of the article, I was trying to kind of think of it more on the whole level of the resort as a whole business.
Yeah.
But where I kind of focused more of my energy on in the assignment was how kind of, even though we're all one company, I used our office in terms of membership as one company, and then looked at the resort and all the different departments as the different alliances and internal units that we use. And so that was kind of where I took I think I grasped the most meaning and related it to my line of work, because everything is relationship based. If the customer doesn't feel that because it's a lot of money. So if they're not feeling that they're honestly spending their own money versus their company's money, they're not going to do it. So it's a lot more of an emotional sell in terms of selling the membership.
Good. So let me add to that. One of the things you might want to keep in mind, of course, is the fact that maybe in your case, making the sale might be critical, but a lot of times your ability to convince them when your potential customer or a prospect comes to your premises, it could be that you still rely on third parties to be able to deliver on time and be able to deliver an experience that the customer wants to get, so that they can go back there and come back and renew the membership. So it's not about just acquiring, but you also want these customers to come back and go say positive things as well. Huh? So which is very interesting, because on the one hand, you talk about from your office, how do the different departments have to work together, but you can also take away from the fact that, but your ability to be successful depends as well as, once I make the sale, can we also deliver on the promise? Huh? And that might mean that the resorts that you work with have to work with the adequate third parties to be able to deliver on the big customer experience. Huh? But anyway, we'll talk a little bit about that. So that's something that is hopefully something that you also took away from this as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that input.
Yeah, but we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So because in my head, the reason why I gave those two articles are something that's very clear, but I just want to see how much of it comes through to you, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it as well. Kylie.
Hi, sorry, I hit the wrong button. So from the first article, the shrinking core article, I really kind of applied that to, I'm in kind of 3 different organizations right now, different companies. And I think it applied to each one in a different way, mostly to the Indiana Small Business Development Center that I work with, in terms of like how I work with small businesses and advising them to kind of think of all those different relationships that impact their business. So especially in small businesses, it's usually, 10 or less people. So everyone's kind of all hands on deck. Yeah. So I think it was a really important message to just kind of share amongst an entire organization, to not only consider like the frontward facing customers, but also like the stakeholders and the suppliers, and like who's kind of all in your court that impacts you and your business. And then with the second article, it actually got me thinking back to a book called The Pumpkin Plan that I read a couple months ago by Mike Michalowicz. And it really talked about kind of tying in that operational excellence and how it's all about strategy. So maybe a middleman does help, or maybe a middleman doesn't help, and just kind of applying what strategy works best for the exact goal of your company, because it may be a similar business plan and a business model to another organization within an industry, at the same industry, but what works for one person isn't going to work for everybody. So it's really kind of honing in on your exact focus, such as operational excellence or different value-based structures, to figure out like where that strategy lies, and taking out anything that doesn't work and adding in things that really, really do.
And it's good that you mentioned this, because what you will find out is that, especially in your current job where you're advising a lot of firms and everything else, you will see that different firms with different owners will have different priorities. So essentially the question is asking them to nail down, do they want to be a product leader? Do they want to be an operational excellent player? Or do they want to be a customer intimate player? That is a strategy, right? Mm-hmm. Because that is going to then drive what kind of partnerships they want to have with what kind of customers that they want to attract as well. Eh?
Yeah, oh, definitely.
So that's something that, again, so that's good that you talk about that. The fact is that at least in your job, it necessitates you to advise different kind of customers differently. So Kylie, if you don't mind, could you please email me the name of the book that you said, so that I can share it with the others as well? Not the book itself, but at least a reading list so that others can take a look at as well.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Absolutely. And for the others, one of the books that is a personal favorite of mine, I'll also send you the name of that book. It's called Reorganize for Resilience. It is written by one of the authors from the Shrinking Core, Expanding Periphery. And essentially, that book talks a lot about the concept of customer centricity. And I will later on, once we've had everybody discuss, I'll try to explain to you in my head what's the difference between customer intimacy and customer centricity. So again, that's the name of the book that I'll also suggest at the end of today's session in an email, along with any other article that I think might be relevant as well. So, but Kylie, if you could send me the name of that book or the article, that'll be fantastic.
Of course, thank you.
Thanks. Randy.
Yeah, for me, I thought both of them were very interesting reads. The shrinking core principle kind of plays into my company Amori's role because we are a contract resource organization, right? So a lot of our customers are looking to develop that partnership because their core is shrinking. And so they're using our services to kind of do that. But at the same time, we use third-party services for us. So specifically for animal testing, and I know that's a touchy subject when I'm talking to non-scientists about testing on animals. But we don't personally do any animal testing. We do the feed and bleed is outsourced to a partner that we used when we had our own internal R&D, and it's been developed over years, and it's been fantastic. And when it mentions trusted partners, like we have no doubt that they're going to deliver on the work that we need for our customers. And so that's a wonderful principle. And then the other article, the customer intimacy. That discussed customer intimacy. So some of our competitors, I've been told and I'm kind of new to business development. I've only been in it for like 6 months. So previously I was a chemist for 7 years. So I'm just kind of getting into the business aspect of it. And some of our competitors, I was told they aren't really competing in the same business model, despite the fact that they offer very similar services. And I guess I couldn't wrap my head around that. But after reading that article, I realized that they were more, we were more customer intimacy, and they were more operational leadership.
Fantastic.
So
indeed.
Yeah. So it wasn't until I read that started to make sense to me. So they're a very cheaper commodity. They beat us on price, but again, it's kind of a plug and play with them. It doesn't have that bespoke, customized offerings that our company has. And I guess for a long time that eluded me until after reading that article.
Indeed. And I think what you say makes a lot of sense. So if you think of the airline example for everybody, right? So what do I mean by that is you guys have flown on, especially if you consider Southwest, and if you take a look at Allegiant and JetBlue and everything else, or if you take a look at Delta, for example, what you'll see is that each one of them, what is the core business of each of these airlines? It's actually taking you from place A to place B, right? But the question is not about taking you from place A to place B, but the question is how do you take your customers from place A to place B? So Southwest is in the same business of taking a customer from place A to place B, just like American Airlines, but you know that the business model of Southwest is quite different from the business model of Delta or American Airlines and everything else. So essentially, that is what you need to really understand, is that you may be competing with other players in the market, but you could be competing with organizations with different strategies. And what you also need to understand, and then hopefully that is a key takeaway that some of you took away, is when I deal with competition that has a different strategy, the way they go about making promises to the customers, the way they go about delivering on those promises could be completely different from the way you are delivering your value and your promises to the customer. The way you go about allocating your resources to make sure that the customers are satisfied, which by the way is the core tenet of customer relationship. Satisfied customers lead to loyal customers, so which means that we need to keep our customers happy, and there are multiple ways of keeping our customers happy, and that is what you need to understand is I could be in competition with another customer, but their strategy is going to dictate every other activity that they're going to do, but your customers are going to be comparing both of you, because they're looking at both of you as suppliers, and your value proposition in your expectation setting should be very clear so that the customers know where you are creating value and where they get better value with you rather than the competition. So that's just something, hopefully, as we progress, you will begin to understand this a lot more. But I'm glad that you're taking that away as well. I'm glad that you're making that reflection about what your strategy is, and now you start understanding why your competition is doing things the way they're doing. But one of the things you really need to understand is that it doesn't really matter what their strategy and what your strategy is. It all depends upon what the customer thinks is the expectation and who is better kind of placed to serve and meet their expectations. So that's one of the things you need to keep in mind as well, because your ability to meet those expectations is what is going to drive your customers to be satisfied and having long-term relationships with you. So that's great. So now let's go with Andrea. Andrea, you there? All right, well, let's go with Joe, and then we'll come back to Andrea. Joe, you there?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Great.
Okay, cool. Got my mic to work this week.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed reading both of the articles. I think the one that really stuck out to me, though, was the customer intimacy one, because that kind of directly relates to what I do every day. So I work as a civil engineer. So, every project that we work on, whether it's, weeks or months or even years, depending what the project actually is, hold on a second, my phone's ringing.
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that, guys. So that's a big part of it is customer intimacy. We have to develop those relationships with our different clients. They have a problem that they need us to solve, or a project that they need us to develop for them. So that communication we have and that interaction we have is key. Whatever issues come up along the way, we have to solve for them. And a couple of our clients that we work with every day, constantly, it's nice because we're at the point with them that they don't go out to other engineering firms looking for
Joe, you there?
Hey, sorry, I'm having issues with my mic again. I'm not sure what's going on with this here.
Yeah.
But what I was trying to say, though, is it's nice with our clients that we work with constantly, that we've been working with for a long time, because they don't actually seek out other engineering firms and kind of bid us against each other. They feel comfortable with us and they want to come back to us. They use us every time, kind of because they know what they're getting with us. They feel comfortable with us, and we provide them with the product that they're looking for. So, that client interaction, that customer intimacy, that's really kind of what hit home for me.
Let me ask you this. So are you guys the cheapest? Well, are you guys the most expensive option for your customers to deal with? Or are you guys in the medium range, or are you on the lower end?
I'd say we're kind of in the middle. It kind of depends based on what the project is. If we're comfortable with what we're doing, we can kind of bring the price down a little bit, I guess. If it's really complex and we aren't really sure exactly how we're going to go about it, then we might raise the price a little bit. Clients that we have a really long relationship with, we might lower the price a little bit, just because we want to keep that relationship going with them.
Good.
But it all depends, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So one last question before I move to Andrea is, so when you talk about customer intimacy, right, when you want to do everything to help your customers, to what extent do you actually keep track of how profitable are your interactions with these customers? Do you keep track of that?
In a way, we don't have like a specific ledger or anything like that, but we can tell by their reactions, if their end product comes in under budget or something like that. We try to kind of what you were talking about, adding value to their process.
I'm not concerned as much about the value for them. I'm more concerned about what value you get. So a lot of times customer intimacy would also mean your cost to serve goes up. Do you understand?
I see what you're saying.
So which is what so essentially customer intimacy comes at a price.
Yeah, it does. And I know, like, when we get new clients, we always try to kind of go that extra mile, even more so, to try to make them happy, give them exactly what they want so that we get their repeat business. But yeah, I would say, like, from our perspective, it might, cost a little more, have a couple extra hours on a project for us to give them a better product, but in the long run, it makes, a better relationship for us. We get more work from them and everything like that. And like I said, when they aren't bidding us against other people, it works out better for us. We get more work that way.
By the way, this is something that it's just not for you, Joe, but it's for everybody else as well who's listening to this, who's thinking about, of all the strategies, customer intimacy sounds great, but always keep in mind that every time the concept of customer intimacy more or less is, I am going to bend over, me or us as an organization, we're going to bend over backwards to meet every whim and fancy of the customer. Again, the professional whim and fancy of the customer, right? And the question is, when we do that, don't forget that everything that you do adds to your cost to serve the customer. And the key thing you have to keep in mind is that when you do this, is you need to do this and you still need to be profitable. And that is something, we'll touch upon this later on in today's session, but it's just not for you, Joe. That's why I asked the question, but it's for everyone here who is taking a look at saying, okay, this article and saying, it's very interesting that we need to be customer intimate to be profitable. But I guess most of you know that one of the most profitable airlines, is it Delta or is it Southwest? You'll be surprised that a lot of times that the profitability, more or less, sometimes Southwest does much better than Delta, even though the fact is that Delta is a full line service provider, whereas Southwest is much more focused on a business model where they're operationally excellent, right? So essentially what you need to understand is that it all depends upon the fact is you can be perfectly good in what you're trying to do, but becoming customer intimate sometimes comes at a price, and the price of an airline ticket. So I mostly fly Delta. And I'm really happy with what I get there. It's not as cheap as when I want to fly with Southwest. But I know that if I fly with Southwest, I need to be dealing with a lot of different kinds of different kinds of things I have to give up. But I don't want to necessarily give up. I'm willing to pay a higher price. But then Delta knows that the cost to serve my needs are much higher and they can charge a higher price. But we'll get to that a little bit later on as well. So Andrea, so I guess you've fixed things, so if you'd be kind enough to just tell me what your key takeaways were.
My key takeaways, well, I'm in education, so in secondary education as a high school teacher, so but I teach at a private high school, so we talk a lot about who our stakeholders are and building relationships with our stakeholders, because our students and their families are essentially our customers, and they need to choose to come to our school. Just like in post-secondary, they need to, choose to come to Ball State. So, so we look at, building all the relationships, and the age of my school is now we're on our third generation of students. So the students we have now, their grandparents may have attended the school. Yeah. So building that, streamlining of that relationships, and even, with our alumni, as a lot of our alumni have businesses, if we need t-shirts done, we have a vendor list that we look at for our suppliers, and they're on the approved vendor list, to keep that flow and that the relationship with all of our stakeholders. So, that's where, in that first article, when I was talking about, building and keeping those relationships going through those different things, that's what I thought about. And then in the second article, again, it just, if I don't have students in my classroom, we don't function as a school. So, because, they're paying, tuition to be there. So, that customer intimacy, and especially in my classes, I'm a business ed teacher. So there's one required class that they have to take in the business ed program, and then everything else is electives. So we have to make our classes, make that customer intimacy with the kids to make them want to come in and, choose to be in our classes, structure things, the way they want to structure, just, or fun things, I teach marketing, so we do a unit on Coca-Cola, so I bring in Coca-Cola bottles. So, it's just giving the customer some things that they want.
Okay. Perfect. And I think this is education is something that's close to my heart as well. I think this is something that you and I can discuss a lot. And I think that's something that, again, later on we can talk about this as well. But yeah, it's nice to see how you're trying to take a look at getting more students into your class so that they would choose this as electives and stuff like that. It's pretty interesting. That's what we have to do here as well. So great. So that's good. So that's Andrea. So we have Bob. Again, I'm calling you Bob because you said I could call you Bob. So if you prefer Robert, I could do Robert too. So
nope. Bob's good.
There
Short.
you go, Bob.
Letter.
Take it away. Yeah.
You hear me? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Andrea kind of she actually aligned a lot with what my takeaways were from the first article, with the idea of the 4 different types of stakeholders. And I like the term relationship capital that they use. It's something that you think you know of, and then you read about it and you're like, oh, that makes sense. I've always worked sales in my professional career, so I don't always think about those other relationships that the company is building up with the different stakeholders, your sellers, your within the organization itself, and the alliances that it mentions. So that's those were like kind of my key takeaways from the first article. On the second one, it was really interesting to read about the 3 different value disciplines. And I think when you work for a company and you read through those value disciplines, you kind of see where your company most likely aligns. I work for an ed tech startup that's venture capital base funded. So we immediately were directly in the customer intimacy where we're trying to sell a product to these instructors who are constantly giving us feedback of we have a good idea, we have a good product. There's certain things that our founders and our engineers don't necessarily think of. So our product team is constantly working with our customer success team to kind of listen to what the customer's saying and adjust our product in a similar way and add some certain features which they are saying we have to have for us to implement this product in our schools. And then we have to be careful because if you do that too much, you have feature bloat. Yeah. You'll have your engineers working on a feature that one person says that they really need in the market, but everyone else says, that's not something they actually find valuable. So we have to be very careful that we're not just adding all these features and then we have something that's not valuable to our customers anymore. So that was my key takeaways from it.
Okay. So now we've had everybody share some of their thoughts. Now, anybody want to take a kind of guess as to why I gave you those 2 articles? Type in your name and then you could I could call out your name and then you could answer. So that's easier that way. Anybody, why do you think I assigned you those 2 articles? And keep in mind this is a class on CRM. And link it back to what we discussed in last class. All right, McKenna, please take it away.
I guess you just said it. I think everything can be focused back on relationships, whether it's with the customer, with internal parties, with outsourcing, with third parties. Everything has a relationship, whether that relationship is a face-to-face one or a virtual one. And that was something that I actually was part of my questions on my assignment, is kind of as we're starting to shift more and more towards and I know CRM isn't just focused on a CRM system, but as we're continuing to focus more and more towards a tech-based business platform just in general across the board, how are we going to maintain those strong relationships that in the past and even now are a lot more face to face? And so I was like trying to figure out, like, is that what makes them intimate, or is it the true content of the relationship and it doesn't matter if it's someone overseas or someone that sits next to you?
Yeah. So essentially this is my take on your question, and then I think this is pretty much why I want to do a one-on-one with each one of you, because each one of you works for a different industry. And I want to give you my thoughts on a lot of your questions as well. And I think we really need to do a one-on-one on that one. But let me answer your question on the tech part. So I think the concept of how technology is going to change the way we interact with our customers, but one of the things is technology has made it possible for us to reach out to customers using multiple formats, and the customers can reach out to us in multiple formats, right? And the key aspect is no matter what, as far as the customer is concerned, the customer is always going to say, irrespective of whichever channel that I use to communicate with you, I want to make sure that all of them are streamlined. So for example, a customer could go to your website, they could interact with you there, they could talk to a chat bot, and then if there's more questions, they're going to call up a call center. And when they call the call center, what do you think they expect? They expect the call center to be up to date about what you are looking at and what kind of questions you had chatted on the chatbot. Does it make sense? And then they could say, you know what, that is great, but maybe I want to go and visit the property. And when they come to the property, the person who meets them should be able to have kind of an idea about who is the person visiting them, what is the history so far, and then they could pick it up from there. So essentially the concept of omni-channel communication. Omni-channel is irrespective of whatever channel the customer communicates with you. The customer wants a seamless sharing of information within your organization, so that when they come in, they don't want to take the time to say, you know what, I just spent time talking to the people in your call center, and don't tell me that they didn't brief you about my visit. Does it make sense? And that kind of seamless experience is what technology is making it possible, but that the expectations of the customers are rising as well. And another thing that you need to keep in mind here as well is the fact that you are going to have different kind of customers who will have different affinity towards technology. And some customers might say, I do not want to use technology. I might still want to do something face to face. And the question you have to ask yourself at that point in time is, are we going to be everything for everybody? That is, are we going to have a kind of a salesperson or a service person who's going to do face to face? Are we also going to have a call center where if the customer wants to call, we're going to do it? But if the customer says, I want to chat, am I also going to have somebody who's going to be doing 24-hour chatting with the customers? So again, the question about what kind of segments do we want to target? What is the promise we're going to make to them about what they should be expecting? All of this is going to dictate what kind of technologies and how are we going to interact with our customers. Right? So all of these things is what is needed for you to understand before you start thinking about technology. So I really think your ability as an organization to use technology should be decided after you decide what is it that you as an organization stand for, what should you be known in the marketplace for, what should the customer expect from us when they come to us. But that means what kind of customers do we want? Do we know what their needs are? And do those needs align with what we want to offer them? So that if we know that we can offer them something good, we should set the right kind of expectations. And then once we set the expectations, do we have an organization in place to be able to deliver on it? So it's a kind of a stepwise approach that you need to take into consideration, but it all boils down to what do you as a company want to be known for, right? And then technology is the next part of it. And that's one of the key takeaways that you should have from the last session where we talked about CRM, maintaining customer relationships. People think of it as a tool, but you need to have strategies in place. You need to make sure that I'm very clear about what is it that my organization wants to do. And then in order for me to achieve that, what kind of different relationships do I need to have within my organization and external to the organization and along with the customer as well. And then we can start talking about whether technology and how technology can enable this to you, right? So it's a long-winded answer, but hopefully, McKenna, that answers your one question. But we can talk a lot about this. I can even suggest some very nice books as well about managing customer experiences as well, especially when you take a look at technology.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Brock, you were beginning to type something. Do you want to say something as well?
Well, I was just going to discuss. We talked about standardized communication was kind of a takeaway, I think, from last week, right? So that we're sending the same message from all functions, and I think that a lot of this kind of speaks to, standardizing that whole process and making sure that we're speaking the same language throughout, right? That's where I was.
Okay, all right. So now, so this is my take on this, and then I'll go into the presentation that we have for today. So if you take a look at what we were discussing last week, we were talking about the concept of customer relationship management. And we talked about how customer relationship management, the key is customer relationship. It is not about technology. In fact, if they are relying on technology to be able to manage your relationships with your customers without understanding what is it that you want to stand for and who are the kind of customers we want, most likely you're going to fail. So technology is only an enabler, right? So which means the fundamental aspect we should be asking ourselves, which if you go back to the slide deck from last week, we said avoid the 4 pitfalls of CRM. And the first one was having a very clear idea about what is the strategy of our organization. The strategy of your organization, or, okay, I should be very careful. Some of you might be working in very big organizations where the organization strategy is one aspect, but you might have a business unit. So you might be talking at the level of your business unit. This is for those of you who are working for big organizations, right? So what happens is you might have a strategy of an organization, or if you're big enough, your business unit. You'll hear the terms SBU, strategic business units. Your SBU could be really big, where we can say we have a strategy for our business unit. Right? And that strategy is going to dictate where your organization is going to be putting in a lot of resources. Right? And that will then dictate what kind of customers do we want to try and attract? What are we going to make to them in terms of offerings? And based on those offerings, how are we going to set the expectations to the customers in line with our strategy? Right? So that is why if you take a look at it, strategy is a fundamental key aspect. So before we talk about CRM as a technology and anything else, we should be thinking of CRM as, well, this is great, but why do we want to achieve this customer relationship? But what do we stand for as a company, right? And so essentially, if you take a look at a company like Apple, I know that I'm giving a B2C example, but that's something that everybody can identify with. If you go back to the first article that you read, the article which has got more to do with the 3 kinds of strategy, right? So that's the one that's got to do with product leadership, with operational excellence, and with customer intimacy. So if I ask you, if you have to choose, so one of the key takeaways from that article is it's not that firms do not try to have operational excellence as well as customer intimacy, but they have to make one choice about what do they want to be known in the market for, right? If you take a look at Apple, what do you think is their strategy? You have to choose between the 3. Do you think they're product leadership? Are they operationally excellent? So yeah, Randy, go ahead.
I was going to say they're definitely product leaders.
Product leader, right? So essentially then, if that is the case, if you are a customer of theirs, what are your expectations from Apple products?
Cutting edge technology.
Absolutely, right? And the fact is that do they always fulfill your needs? That's great, but they do fulfill the needs, but as far as they're concerned, their ability to charge a premium to you is based on their positioning of themselves as a product leader, right? Now think of think of Dell, right? So when you think of Dell, what kind of strategy do you think they follow? Is it product leader? Is it operational excellence? Or is it customer intimacy? So Andrea is right. For the longest time, Dell is known as operationally excellent. So there were times when Dell would say, you know what, we are going to let the HPs of the world and the Apples of the world do their own stuff. What we want to be known for is we want to be affordably priced computers. And most of you might also notice is that fact is that when they're operationally excellent, that you do not find Dell in most Best Buys or any one of these stores. Why is that the case? Every time they work with a Best Buy or a retailer, that is a middle person, and you have to pay them commissions and you have to pay them kind of discounts, and they're like your distributors, your retailers. And essentially what that means is that that is extra value that the retailer gets, which means that I have to add that cost that I have to pay to the retailer to the price of my laptop that increases the price of the laptop. So which means that for the longest time, the idea of Dell was we are going to reduce as much of the service. We are going to have a very operationally efficient model towards presenting it to the customers. There used to be a time when people would joke about the fact is that Dell was so operationally excellent that their idea of service, the customers would call them Dell hell. That is, anytime they want any kind of customer service, the kind of service they got from them was they have a very, very bad thing. That's interesting, Andrea. You're right. They do have some relationship with Costco to keep prices low, but for the longest time, they would not work with anybody. But the key is, if they want to be seen as a low-cost player, they have to work with a low-cost player as well. But the key aspect is they're operationally excellent to the point where they can pass on any savings that they have to the customer as well. So that leaves us with a company like HP. Where do you think HP and Sony is? They're more of what we would say is customer intimacy. If you take a look at the packages that you get with HP and the computers, they have much better service on top of the product as well. So essentially what you see is that the strategy of your firm is going to dictate how you're going to position yourself. And you will see that the price points that you can charge are also going to be in line with that. So let me ask you this. So if I'm paying a lot of money for an Apple product and I'm seen as a product leader, and if the product fails, how are the customers going to react to it? All right. So I guess if I have an expensive product and the product fails, the customers at that point in time are going to have very, very high expectations from the product, that they might say, well, guess what? You are a product leader and look at what you put out there. So essentially, my ability to maintain that relationship with my customers could go down because I've positioned myself as a product leader, but everything that I put out there in terms of the products are not in line with the expectations of the customers. So which means that if my customers are not happy, you will not be able to maintain relationships with the customer. So the key of everything is strategy. Understanding what do we as a company stand for would also mean that we are going to dictate what kind of customers we would like to focus on, what kind of messaging are we going to provide to our customers, what kind of go-to-market strategies. So what do I mean by go-to-market? How do I bring my products to the customers? How do I make that happen? How do I have a service delivery team to be able to deliver on the promises to the customers? How am I going to price the product? And all of these, the ramifications of your strategy is going to be felt on every aspect. And when I decide what kind of customers I want and how am I going to set the expectations, I'm also making sure that I'm also developing capabilities within my organization to be able to deliver on those expectations to the customer. So that is why the way you should take into consideration both the articles and link it back to CRM is, we talked about one of the key things you need to understand about CRM is, if I want to maintain a relationship with my customer, I first of all need to know what do I and what do we as a company stand for and what is our strategy, because that strategy is then going to dictate what kind of customers we want to have and how are we going to then work together to meet the requirements of the customers and then have a long-lasting relationship. So that was the purpose of the article, which is looking at the three kinds of strategies that most firms actually have to do. Now, the next part, which is where I actually think is more reasonable, is when you read the article on the shrinking core, expanding periphery, the main purpose is if I know that I am going to be a product leader, right, or I'm going to be an operational excellence, or I'm going to be looking at customer intimacy, your strategy is then going to dictate who are the customers you want to get, who are the partners that you want to work with, what is going to be my value propositions and everything else. So customer centricity is the word that we will use. So now this is what I said earlier is I make a clear difference between the strategies, which is actually your product leadership, your customer intimacy, and your operational excellence. But the second article is more about what we say customer centricity. What does it mean? Is I can choose any strategy that I want. I can choose to be a product leader, but despite being a product leader, I have to be customer centric in the fact that any solution, any product or service that I put out into the market, yes, I need to be known in the market as a leader, but my products and my services should fulfill a need that the customer has. Now, some of you are probably wondering, well, what if the customer does not know what their needs are? So if I'm a product leader, if my strategy is I'm being a product leader, then I should take efforts to understand both what we say the articulated needs of the customers, that is what the customer says they want, and what we say are latent needs. Any idea what latent needs are? What are latent needs? Anybody? I see Kylie is typing. Kylie, just, yeah, exactly. They didn't know they need it until it was right in front of them. Absolutely. So latent needs are needs that the customers even do not know exist. So again, go back to the Apple example I was talking about. Apple is seen as a market leader, but they were successful to a large part when they came up with their iPods and their iPhones and then their iPads, because yes, there was never a product like that before, but they also fulfilled a need that the customer was not able to articulate very well as well. So if I am a product leader, I can also be customer centric by taking care of what are the problems of the customers, whether the customer can say it or not, and then fulfill the need. So I could be product centric I could be a product leader by means of my strategy, but I need to develop everything keeping in mind what are the needs of the customers, which means for a company like Apple, they have to make sure that they have to work with the right kind of marketing agencies. They have to work with trying to understand the needs of the customers. They have to work with the right high quality manufacturers of products. So they have to maintain all the kind of relationships that you read in the article, but they have to keep in mind that they do this, but they have to fulfill the needs of one of the stakeholders, which is their customers. So they have to be customer centric in that. Now, another example of that is a company called Philips. So hopefully you've heard it. Philips is a Dutch multinational. Now, Philips, for the longest time, for those of you who are aware of the slogans of Philips, in the 70s, the logo and the slogan of Philips was "Let's make things better." So they were a product leader company. They still are. But their motto was "Let's make things better." But unfortunately, they created a lot of products that did not necessarily meet the requirements of the customer. So they were making great products, but they were not able to sell them, right? So what happened, they said, you know what, we are not going to listen to the engineers anymore. So we would like to be seen more as a customer intimate firm. And they decided to go the other extreme where they listened to marketing folks. And they decided that they want to have products that was easy to use for the customers. And the next slogan that they came up with was called Sense and Simplicity. You can go look it up. But the problem with Sense and Simplicity was that when you go and ask your customers what they want, what do you think you're going to get? You're going to get customers saying that they want a multitude of things. But once you design a product that has all of these and you ask the customers, are you going to buy it? They're going to say, well, that is what we wanted, but the price is too high for us to take a look at. So what happened was the Sense and Simplicity also did not work. And now what they decided to do was they said, what is our core business? What do we want to be known in the market for? We want to be known in the market for being a product leader. So our strategy is be a product leader. So what they decided to do was they said, but we want to be a product leader, but we also want to create products that will resonate with our customers, right? And so what they said was we're going to create a slogan that says innovation and you, right? And how do they put it in practice? I'll give you an example. Does everybody know what an MRI scanner is? If not, watch the TV show House. That's an old one with Hugh Laurie, and his answer to everything is put your patients through an MRI scanner. It stands for magnetic resonance imaging. And essentially what MRI scanner is, essentially what you have is an MRI scanner. If anybody has seen how it works, it's like one of these big round things that you put people in, and it takes pictures of your body and your brains and everything else. And what you really hope for is that you find a brain, and that's good, but anything else that you find that is an anomaly is something not good for you as well. So one of the things what they found out was that any MRI scanner, what you'll see is that for customers who go in there, if you happen to be claustrophobic, you are going to be scared going in, and scared is an understatement. Essentially, if you go in there and there's going to be a lot of noise coming in as well, an MRI scanner does not give for a very pleasant customer experience. And this is Philips, which is seen as a market leader. So what did Philips do? They said, why don't we try and create an open scanner? So essentially, again, think of a scanner where you're lying in the bed, but where you don't have to go into a kind of a hollow tube. It's almost like a round thing. And then, yes, so essentially what you say, yes, they don't know, they let you choose music to listen to. Yes, I think McKenna, what they do actually right now is that you don't even go in. What you have is they created a scanner, a complete new design where no longer do you go into a kind of a tube or a tunnel. You're just lying down and the scanner goes around you taking pictures. And essentially what they do then is that they then work with one of their sister divisions. It's called Philips Lighting. And then they could actually portray very nice pictures. So you could be in a hospital room. Essentially, you're not going into a tunnel. You're not going to go into a scary experience. And you're lying down there. And essentially what happens is that, and with the light projections, for example, if I'm a kid, I can have pictures of, let's say, for example, I'm in a zoo, and the kid is no longer frightened. Now, that is a very good example of being a product leader, but being customer-centric in designing the products that will fulfill the needs of the customers. So that is an example of product centricity, product leadership, and then linking it to the findings from your second article, which is on customer centricity. So what I want you to take away from this is the following. The first article talks about what is the strategy of my firm. The strategy of my firm or my business unit is going to dictate a lot of things that we have to choose about what kind of customers do we want to choose. So essentially, the first article should lead to what are the findings from the second article. So which means that if I am a product leader, I should choose the right kind of customers. I should choose what kind of suppliers do I want to work with, what kind of delivery partners do I need to work with, what kind of value propositions am I going to come up with. And that is going to be completely different from if I choose an operational model. And let's talk about Southwest Airlines, right? Now, how do you think Southwest Airlines manages to give you a good price, not very high, at the same time be very profitable? Any idea about how their business model works? And this one, if you know the answer, I think you can just unmute yourself and say what is the reason for the success of Southwest Airlines?
Customer service.
Yeah, so customer service, but is it just that? Now, let me ask you this. For those of you who have flown Southwest, for the most part, at least in the early days, did Southwest fly to all the big airports or did they fly to the smaller airports? Yeah. Why do you think they flew to the smaller airports? So McKenna, it's fine. So you can just unmute yourself.
Sorry, I apologize.
It's Andrea. Okay, yeah.
I take Southwest almost, I'd say 3 times a month to go up to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I fly into smaller airports and then into the smaller Orange County airport. And I feel like for me, the reasoning that even though they've spread out to larger airports, but the reason they started in smaller airports is they kind of become the hub of those smaller airports. Yeah. So like you almost say like, oh, like you hear people talk and they're like, oh, it's really easy to fly out of Southwest out of this airport. And so that's kind of what they've been known for. And they almost have created a good partnership with those smaller airports to get them more on the map, get more people coming through. Yeah. But yeah, just from my experience, that's what I've noticed.
That's good to know. So essentially, essentially what it means is that Southwest Airlines flies to smaller airports, mostly because these smaller airports, which are in maybe smaller cities or smaller municipalities, actually also give them discounted rates to park and fly into those places. So essentially, I am actually making a little bit of money, or I'm getting discounts to be able to get into those, because again, their local businesses are likely to benefit because of this. But the second aspect of it is that when you're in smaller airports, what happens to traffic? Traffic is much lower. So which means that I can Yeah, but we'll get to Andrea in just a minute. So essentially what it means when I fly to smaller airports, I can turn around faster because there's not too much traffic there, which means my ground staff can unload baggages much faster. I can also have people getting in, and it's going to be much cheaper for me to get the people in much faster. I can do a quick turnaround, and I'm not going to wait forever to taxi, find the right time to take off and everything else. So that's one of the reasons that they try to make money out of flying into smaller airports, because the turnaround is very, very fast, right? Now, is that all? What else? Andrea, do you have anything else about why Southwest is so successful?
Well, just going on with your smaller airports too, and they have the shorter routes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I've been flying Southwest for, 30 years. So, like what you said, the gate fees and things like that, but also when we said about customer service, like the no frills, there's no meals involved.
Yeah.
So, that cost of, all of that, loading that and those types of things. I mean, you get snacks but that's because, goes along with those shorter flights. You're only in air for so long, and then you're down in either deplaning the whole flight or, getting other people on. So that's my take on Southwest.
Absolutely. So again, so building up on what McKenna said, the other aspect of Southwest Airlines is that most of the time you have to pay for everything, right? Why do they do that? Essentially, you have to pay for food if you want to have it. These days, you have the choice. There used to be a time when you didn't have the choice, but essentially that's it. If I have to give you a kind of food or something like that, I need to, of course, make sure that I need to buy it, which means my cost to serve goes up. I need to have somebody, again, put it on the plane. I need to have people handing it out. And then what's going to happen, every time there's going to be garbage from it, I have to take it out and then I have to dispose it. And everything is a cost, right? And what happens when your cost goes up? You have to make money, right? So which means that if my cost goes up, what happens to the price of my ticket?
It goes up.
Absolutely. So which means that, but my customers, what do my customers want when they think of Southwest Airlines?
They want no frills. They want to get on the plane.
Absolutely.
They want to be able, to get on the plane, get to where they're going. And,
exactly.
The one thing with Southwest, like you were saying with Delta, I don't, the one thing if, the getting in line, all of that stuff to get in your seat, in open seating. So they don't have to ticket either. So Indeed. It's open seating. So there's no assigned seating, all of that stuff. So it's open, open seating. So.
Indeed. So essentially what they're saying is that now anyone in this audience, would you be willing to pay a premium to get a no frills experience?
Not a chance.
Yeah, exactly, no. Right? So which means that what they're saying is that their positioning is no frills. If it's no frills, you get a lower price. But when you think about it, most of the time what happens is they say as much as possible, they don't even let you. In fact, to the extent is they ask you to say, if I'm going to come in, this is what you're supposed to be expecting. So essentially, the earlier you check in, the earlier you get better seating. Or if you want to pay a little bit more extra to get sit, I love this. What do they call it? Faster disembarkation or something like that. So essentially, that is, if you pay $10 or $15, you sit right up in the front so that you can get out much faster. So essentially, what they're trying to do is that they're trying to make money on every extra service that they add. But essentially, why do they do it? Is essentially what they say is that for those customers who are very, very price conscious, we are going to make sure that we are going to give you the lowest possible price. But when you do that, do not expect a lot of what kind of amenities in line with that as well. And what you also see is that when you do that, when your expectations typically are lower and you have flight attendants who are funny, when your expectations from a no frills are low, but anything that they do which is normal starts gaining on more significance. Now, apart from this, what you might not know is that anybody know what kind of plane model they fly? Do you think they fly Airbus, Bombardier, or do you think they fly Embraer or Boeing?
They do fly those Airbuses. I just got bumped off a flight.
Wait, you have an Airbus? That is new, because most of the time the whole business model of Southwest is they only fly Boeing 737s.
Well, is it was it Boeing, Airbuses? What was the one that just got grounded?
That's 737 MAX. That's the Boeing 737 MAX.
Okay.
But for the longest, essentially what you do is that the whole business model of Southwest is operational excellence, which is based on the fact is that they fly only Boeing 737s. And the reason why they do that is that when I only fly Boeing 737, then I become a key customer of Boeing and I get preferential treatment. So which means that I can get better services, which means my planes are better maintained, which means my cost of flying customers from place A to place B goes down. My cost of training my personnel goes down. My cost of training my ground crew in terms of unloading baggage and everything else goes down. Pilot training cost goes down, and every cost that goes down, they are making money on it, but they pass on any kind of benefits to the customers who are looking for low price. It's a long-winded story, but what we're trying to say is that yes, Apple is a product leader which tries to take a look at what are the needs of the customers, which what the customers say and don't say, and then try to fulfill it. But you could also be a Southwest, be operationally excellent, but understand what your customers are looking for, which is no frills, low price. I mean, as low price as possible, then deliver something in those lines. Now, if I ask die-hard Southwest customers who get a kind of a lower amenities on the flight, if I ask them, are you satisfied with your Southwest Airlines experience? What do you think is the answer I'm going to get? The answer is yes. You're always going to have people who crib, but I'm talking about this. I am a frequent flyer with Delta, and I absolutely love Delta. Is it the cheapest? It's not the cheapest, but I like the extra services that I get. Right? So essentially, they need to know which kind of customers depending upon what is their strategy. Which brings us to the last one, which is actually the concept of customer intimacy. Has anybody been to the Ritz-Carlton in their life? Some of you probably go there all the time. Or the Four Seasons, since we have McKenna out here who's worked at Four Seasons. Anybody been to the Four Seasons or the Ritz-Carlton? If you have, and you compare that to all of the other motels that you've been to and other places, it is amazing the kind of experience. I've had a chance twice in my life, no, 3 times, twice to Four Seasons and once to Ritz-Carlton. It is absolutely phenomenal, the kind of service that you get there, right? And essentially, but then when I get the service, anything that I ask, they could help me. I was once in Four Seasons, and it was in Singapore, and I wanted to go watch a play, and all I had to do was go to the concierge and ask them to help me get the tickets. They helped me get the tickets, but the amount of money that I paid per night at a Four Seasons was exorbitant. But of course, when I pay a lot of money, they also take care of me very well, because every time I need to provide extra service to the customer as part of customer intimacy, I also have to I need to spend money on the resources necessary to keep my customers happy. So it's a long-winded story, but I really want you to take away the following. The concept of CRM goes into saying, how do I maintain my relationship with my customers? And that has got to do with making sure that the needs of the customers are met. If I meet the needs of the customers, they're more likely to be satisfied and they're going to engage in a relationship. But if that is the case, I need to know that what are the kind of customers that I'm going to attract? How am I going to maintain that relationship? But how am I going to do this, keeping in mind what do we as a company stand for? So the CRM part of it from last week, you need to understand that it is all about strategy of your firm. Now, fast forward a week after that, link it back to saying, okay, what is the main strategy of my firm? Ask ourselves, do we want to be a product leader? Do we want to be operationally excellent? Or do we want to be customer intimate? Because that will then decide the 4 things that you saw from the second article. That is, what kind of customers do I want? What kind of partners am I going to work with? What are the value propositions I'm going to make? And what are the other third parties I have to deal with as well? So you have to, hopefully you make that connection to understand the reason why I gave you those 2 articles is a strategy is going to drive a lot of things up. A huge part of your CRM is the strategy that you choose. And that strategy is going to decide what kind of customers I want, and that is going to drive your customer centricity. So the article on shrinking core, expanding periphery is about saying, do we as a company want to be customer centric? But how can I be customer centric knowing the strategy of my firm? If my firm is looking at operational excellence, how can I make sure that I am attracting the right kind of customers and setting the right kind of expectations? Is this clear for everyone? And that is the logic for me to kind of link all of this. That is why we begin with the strategy article. So the way you might want to take a look at reading the articles is in terms of asking yourself is the strategy piece comes first, which is what is my strategy of my firm? And then based on that, how am I going to try and implement it and be customer centric as well? Understand that just because a customer is not paying a lot of money does not mean that they don't have expectations. Customer centricity is taking care of your customers, keeping in mind what is the strategy we as a company want to uphold. And customer centricity is about saying sometimes if the customer is looking for something that your strategy is not going to allow you to do, is even saying no to a customer. So customer relationship management is about managing those expectations. And if it's even saying no to a customer, that is what it is about, right? So that is what is the key aspect. Is everybody clear on this part? Right? If I don't hear anything, I'm just going to proceed with it. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take you through. This is a slide deck that I had for today, which I will email all of you. I didn't want to post it ahead because I wanted to see your presentations. But this is something that I'll also email you the presentation. So essentially, we'll start talking a little bit about the concept of customer experience. What is customer experience is the fact is this is pretty much where we are talking about having a strategic choice that you made. What do we want to be known for as a company, right? Then if I know this is what we want to be known for as a company, the key thing is that once I know this is what I want to stand for, how do I take care of my customers given the strategy that I want, right? And that is what we'll talk a little bit more about in terms of customer experience management. The idea being that if I deliver a great customer experience, I'm going to have more loyal customers. So what I'm going to discuss within the next 45 minutes is the aspect of customer experience where I have broken it down into why, who, where, what, and how. And I'll try to explain each one of them soon. And again, this is something that I've had a chance to work with many companies where I've gone and trained many companies. So these are based on some of my observations. And essentially the key aspect here is understanding is that your strategy is already set. Right? Your top management has set your strategy, but now the question is, once I know this is what my company wants to be known in the marketplace for, how am I going to make sure that given my strategy, how will I try to make sure that I deliver a great customer experience? And here you will put all the learnings from the article Shrinking Core, Expanding Periphery. So before I begin, can you list possible reasons as to why organizations want to deliver a great customer experience? So if you don't mind, if you can just type in your answers, why would a firm want to deliver a great customer experience? Just type in your responses. Yep, retention, repeat business, love it. Yep, create loyalty, yep. So 2 more people, we'll wait for 2 more and then we'll go into that. If you have a great customer experience, they want to experience it again and again. This is interesting. So Randy, when you write this, they want to experience it again and again. Are you talking about it from a positive thing or from a negative thing? Because yes, they want to have a great experience, but if every time they ask it could also become very demanding on your side, right? So which means that they can actually become a pain. Or are you saying, you know what, they have a great experience, but they want to experience it again and again, but they're also willing to pay for it? Positive. Okay, good. Oh, Alexis, I like what you're saying. Increase profits through loyalty. Can you explain that? Can you just unmute yourself and explain that?
Yeah, so just like what we read in the article, in the first article about the, which one? Hang on, let me look at my notes. How they say that, like, whenever you, like, do those things, it doesn't always create, like, automatic value, but there's value added that in the future can increase a company's profits.
Okay, good. All right, that's fine. So most of you have typed up. So essentially what I'm going to do is that I'm going to try and talk through this, and I'm going to type my responses on the side. So let me begin by saying, so when you have a great customer experience, what's the first feeling that you have? So essentially what is likely to happen is you're going to have a feeling of positive. Yeah. So you're going to have a feeling of what I was looking for, again, is satisfaction. Joy, sure. Positive, joy, absolutely. We're talking of satisfaction. Now, when I'm satisfied, that is going to lead to what you guys said. It's going to lead to loyalty. Are you guys keeping track of what I'm typing as well on the left? This is the closest I can think of in terms of scribbling on a blackboard. So when I'm having more satisfaction, it's going to give rise to more loyalty, right? Now, when I have more loyalty, as you said, it's going to give a lot of repeat business. Now, repeat business could be because of upselling or cross-selling. Does it make sense? So I can sell more of the same product to my loyal customers. I could also cross-sell. My customer could buy multiple product categories that I have, so I could do that. Absolutely. Now, what happens? So when I have a customer who has a great experience, do you think they're going to be paying a lot of attention to pricing? I mean, exactly. So what you're going to have is that my loyal customers are going to be less price sensitive. I'm not saying that as a result, if you have loyal customers, you can just increase your price, but chances are if the customers know what they're going to get and the value, they see the value in it, they're going to be less price sensitive. Now, for those of you who took classic economics, if I can sell more and if my customer is not price sensitive, so essentially what you're going to have is that the demand, what you sell multiplied by, so essentially what I sell multiplied by, multiplied by your price is going to be your revenue. So which means that if I deliver a great customer experience, my revenues are likely to go up, right? So that's one aspect, right? Now, what happens when you have a loyal customer base? What happens to your cost of innovation? Let's say, I'm going to give you an example. Let us say I have a product, I am a company that is focusing a lot on building new products and putting new products in the marketplace. But every time I spend a lot of money in coming up with an innovation, the risk that I take is that there is nobody out there who wants to buy the particular product. So if I want to have kind of feedback and early adopters, who do you think I'm going to go to? Loyal customers who are pretty happy with what they purchase from us, or am I going to go to the open market? Chances are that I know what you're going to type. What you're going to have is your loyal customers also will tend to be your early adapters. So essentially, if I say adapters, if I spell it wrong, my apologies. There's no spell check in this. So what happens is that when I have loyal customers, they can be early adopters. I can also co-create with my satisfied customers. So when I have early adopters, when I have co-creation possibilities, what happens to my cost of innovation? So when I can adapt, when I have early adopters, when I have people buying in earlier, when I can co-create, my cost of innovation goes down. Yep, I love it. Less risk, lower prices. Lower prices, I'm talking about, actually you're talking about lower costs. I think you know what I mean, because from my teacher's perspective, I don't associate, I have price and cost differently. Essentially, I'm talking about the cost of innovation. I guess that's what I meant there. So if my cost of innovation goes down, that's fantastic. Now, what also is likely to happen in most cases is when I have loyal customers, they are also going to do something, which is what we say, they're going to have positive word of mouth, right? Positive word of mouth is when they say great things and they are willing to actually say, hey, we can act as a reference. So when they act as a reference, especially in today's day and age, where customers want to hear other customers' testimonials, your positive word of mouth could actually help you attract more and newer customers. So which means my cost of acquisition of new customers could also go down. So my loyal customers will say positive things, and that could have an impact on other people, and my cost of acquisition could go down either by finding leads that will automatically find you without you spending money on marketing resources to go find them, which means my cost of acquisition goes down. Or because you have a used case and a very satisfied customers, your sales cycle time, that is the amount of time it takes for you to convince a customer, could go down, because the potential customer might talk to your happy customers and say, you know what, they had a great experience, so we are also happy with it. So your cost of acquisition goes down. Now, what also happens is when you have a loyal customer, when you have a customer who, again, my assumption here is that great experience leads to more loyalty. So what happens when you have a loyal customer is that customer, if they keep coming back to you, and as long as what you're selling is something where the customer keeps coming back to you, so what happens then is more or less they start having predictable buying patterns. So what happens if they have predictable buying patterns, what you'll see is that you can start forecasting better, which means your forecasting accuracy goes up. What happens when my forecasting accuracy goes up? I am able to better work with my third parties. By the way, go back to the article of the shrinking core expanding periphery, which means I can go back to my third parties and I can strike better deals in my supply chain, which means that my cost of goods sold, does everybody know what cost of goods sold is? That is my variable costs to serve the customer, goes down. So what I'm trying to say here is that I've just tried to explain that I'm going to have more loyal customers who are going to buy more, are less price sensitive, which means my revenue goes up. But at the same time, if my cost to serve the customer goes down, my cost of innovation goes down, my cost of acquiring new customers goes down, which means I'm looking at revenues going up and costs going down. And so you go back to what Alexis said earlier, which means if my revenues go up and my costs go down, and at least I know that Kylie is the finance whiz out here. So Kylie, what happens to your profitability? If my revenues go up and my costs go down? Well, Kylie's typing, so let's wait for that. Sorry, that's fine. But you earn more profit. Great. Now, let me ask you this question. So let us say you are a publicly listed firm. That is, you are in the stock exchange. What does having a loyal customer base signal to investors? More value of stock, absolutely. Because your stock price goes up, because any investor is going to take a look at your loyal customer base and is going to think, well, if that's a loyal customer, they're going to do the same thinking that we had before. That means that I can predict reasonably well what are going to be all future incomes for that particular organization. So which means that it's less of a risk for me to be investing in those kind of organizations. So what you see is that if I deliver a great customer experience, not only will I have happy customers who give us more business, I can also attract new customers, but I can also have investors investing in my organization, right? And that is why, if you talk about this, is the key aspect of customer relationship management is delivering a great customer experience. But we have to begin by saying, why are we even talking about this? Why is customer experience so important? And the reason why is that customer experience is going to have a great loyalty effect on your customers, which is going to have a big impact on what's going to come up next. Now, if you say this is great, we need to deliver a great customer experience, what do you think are some of the challenges that companies face to deliver a great customer experience? Again, feel free to type in your responses. What prevents many companies from delivering a great customer experience? I love it. Too much focus on costs. Great. But is that just it? Miscommunication. So Kylie, so unmute yourself. What do you mean miscommunication?
So this could be like what we kind of talked about earlier with when customers communicate one need, if that disconnect happened, then the business might be serving them in ways that they didn't necessarily need or want.
Love it. But actually it happens two ways. First of all, miscommunication might happen when you as a company do not even know what the needs of the customers are, right? That is a kind of miscommunication between the customer and you in terms of understanding what the needs of the customers are, right? But the other thing could also happen is that you could still understand the needs of the customers, but make the wrong kind of promises to your customers, right? So essentially, for example, this is typically what would happen in most organizations is your product teams and your service teams will say, this is what we should be offering to the customers. And then your salespeople out there, again, for any salesperson in this audience, my intention is not to put you down. I am a sales professor as well, but just let you know that a lot of times salespeople in their eagerness to close the deal might make promises to the customers that increases the expectations of the customer, but the rest of your organization might not be in a position to deliver on that higher level of expectation. So it is again a problem of miscommunication. Another problem you could always find is that if you take a look at where Alexis says that she works as a she works for a company that distributes alcohol. So since there is a manufacturer who makes the alcohol and there's the customer and they are in between. So a lot of times what could also happen is that there could be misalignment of communication between the manufacturer, in this case the people who make the spirits. There could be miscommunication between what they say, what is understood by the organization of Alexis, and what is then communicated to the end customer. So there's many things that could happen that could go wrong. And again, this miscommunication could lead to issues that will lead to customers having wrong expectations or very high expectations, and those needs could not be met. Great. That could be another reason. Right? Now, why do you think you have miscommunication within an organization? Anybody? Silos. Fantastic. Randy, can you say what do you mean by silos?
I'm basically referring to the feedback loop. I mean, myself as a salesman, I definitely overpromise. I for sure will admit that. But a lot of times that comes from miscommunication on what our team can actually do because they're busy working on the operational function and not necessarily in giving us feedback of what has worked in the past and what hasn't worked in the past. You know, if I think I sign a deal for a certain type of animal study, I assume that once it gets passed off that it worked well, and I don't get the feedback from them that might not have worked so well.
Okay, great. Bob, I saw that you were beginning to type something. What did you want to say, Bob?
Yeah, the silos is exactly what I was going to say. The departments not communicating or collaborating together.
Indeed. That's one of the big. So how many of you actually in your organizations use Chatter or Slack, or in the past you had Yammer or Microsoft Teams? If you take a look at it, the purpose of one of the main reasons why you use Slack or one of those things is actually to have different departments talk to each other. So silos is very, very important. That's one of the articles which I will send to you guys for you to read. It's called Silo Busting. One of the biggest reasons why you do not, in many companies, struggle to make and deliver a great customer experience is because of the fact that there is a kind of a very siloed approach. And the siloed approach could happen at many levels. So for example, for those of you not familiar with it, silos would be like, hey, I am in marketing. I really don't care what the folks in sales are doing because I am meeting my requirements. I don't really care what the folks in marketing are doing. And then marketing could come up with a different kind of communication, and they may not necessarily share that information with logistics. So again, what happens then is that the logistics will do its own thing. And what you'll see at the end of the day is that different people in different departments have their own way of looking at things, and they don't communicate with each other. So a typical example, going back to what Randy was talking, would be that a salesperson might go to a customer and the customer might say, hey, we are willing to give you the order now, but hey, can you deliver this in 3 months' time? Now, the salesperson is not the person responsible for delivery. So they are the people who might say, I can do it in 3 months if you sign the order now. But your whole organization and the people in production and logistics could say, well, you know what? There is no way that we can deliver this to the customer in less than 4 months. So what we have, for example, is a salesperson making a promise to the customer of delivery in 3 months, which means the customer is now getting an expectation. Wait a minute, you just told me, your salesperson told me that I could get it in 3 months, but actually by the time I get it delivered, it's actually 4 months. So essentially when that happens, do you think the customer is going to have a good experience? Not necessarily. So essentially this lack of communication is what is going to lead to a lot of issues. So I am going to send you guys a couple of articles for you to read, not necessarily for the sake of summarizing it and then sending it to me, but more for you if you're interested. One is on the concept of silo busting. How do you bust silos within organizations? And the other article is specifically talking about 2 specific silos, and the article which is called Ending the War Between Marketing and Sales. That specifically talks about how do you bust silos between marketing and sales. Let's go back to what Brock is saying. Yes, you use chatter, maybe too much. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Sometimes if you do not exactly know how this can actually help you, it could be that you might spend way too much time inputting information and not get anything back. So Brock, you're absolutely right. You have to be very clear about how you want to use these as a form of communication as well. So McKenna, so we have people purchasing a membership while we are renovating our beach club, which is not finished, and we promised it would be done in April. Absolutely. Again, I gave the example of selling a product and delivering it in 3 months when the team cannot do it in 4 months. The same thing. Again, each of you can apply the same thing. That is over promising but under delivering, right? But that could happen because the people within the organization do not always talk to each other. And that could happen for any number of reasons, right? It could also happen for the factors that there's lack of communication. The other thing that you will also find out is that the KPIs, I'm assuming that most of you know what KPIs, key performance indicators, might not be aligned. So if a salesperson is evaluated based on how much revenues they bring in a time frame, essentially all that they're going to care about is making that sale, and then after that it is somebody else's responsibility to deliver on it. Whereas if you start aligning the KPIs across the different departments, then it could lead for a much better way of communication where you might actually force the different departments to talk to each other as well. So that is why you try and take a look at how do we bust silos. So that, what I just said, is one of the ways by which you coordinate the activities of your marketing, sales, supply chain, logistics to talk to each other with the main goal of setting the right expectations and delivering and communicating the right kind of value. Right? In a book I read, they talked about under-promising and over-delivering indeed. So essentially that's what I normally call UPOD, UPOD, under-promise, over-delivered, so that people would have low expectations and be excited after the sale. Why do you say tricky? I agree with you on that, Kylie, but I want to know why you say tricky.
I just think it's such it makes me almost giggle because it was such a clever strategy. And I don't want to say like it's tricking people, but it's like it's very strategic.
Yeah. Again, so what is the risk that you run of constantly under-promising and over-delivering?
Sorry, go ahead, Randy.
No, I totally tried to skip in there. I apologize. No. But I was going to say, I think the issues with under-promising and over-delivering is the fact that you might not get the sale initially. You might not even get the chance to over-deliver if your promises aren't high enough.
Interesting, right? So, but what they're saying is that essentially the under-promise, even the promising, which is lower than what you would normally expect, should still meet the expectation of the customer. I think that's what Kylie means here, right? So it's not necessarily saying that we're going to undersell ourselves. What I think what the concept of under-promise and over-deliver is that we tell, for example, the customer says, I want it delivered. So I want it delivered in 3 days, right? And what you do is that you say, yes, we can deliver it in 3 days. Does it make sense? So in that way, under-promises is that making sure that you know that your capabilities will help you deliver it to the customers in 2 days, but you don't tell the customer you're going to do it in 2 days unless it's going to give you an advantage over your competition. Otherwise, what you do, you say, I can deliver it in 3 days, but you go ahead and deliver it in 2 days. So what happens in that case is that the customer's expectations is I'm going to get something back in 3 days, but I'm actually going to get it in 2 days. So essentially what you need to understand is that that's what under promise and over deliver is. You have to be very careful there. The reason why I say you have to be very careful there is that if you constantly do to the same customer, what do you think the customer is going to do? The customer is actually going to learn from this. They're going to say, you know what, these people constantly do this every time. Now, this is something that happens to the airline industry a lot. Have you guys, again, some of you are very young, but for the others in the room, have you noticed that what normally in the past you would fly from place A to place B and they would say it would take you 2 hours, right? But now suddenly the same flight, same distance with faster planes and more efficient planes, now suddenly it says 2 hours and 30 minutes. And then what happens when they say it's 2 hours and 30 minutes? Your expectations are, if I land within those 2 hours and 30 minutes, I'm very happy. But what people don't realize is that they've actually under-promised by saying, hey, the flight is 2 hours and 30 minutes, whereas in the past they would be more accurate and say 2 hours. But what happens is when I say it's 2 hours and 30 minutes, I have a chance to keep my customers happy by saying that I constantly deliver on my promise of flying within those 2.5 hours. Does it make sense? It's the same concept. But if you're a frequent flyer, you know that at the end of the day is that, hey, every time they say it's a 2.5 hour flight, I know that the actual flying time is 1 hour and 45. So any claims that they make about saving time is not necessarily true. So what happens is that, yes, you have to be very careful when you under promise and over deliver. But in most of my experience, that it's not, that is a kind of a luxury problem that you have. It's mostly over promise and under deliver is what happens. And if you talk about startups, and for some of you might be working for startups, over promise and under deliver is much more likely than under promise and over deliver. Right? So great. So essentially what we have is that we've talked a lot. So essentially one of the reasons why it's difficult for us is it's silo mentality. It's about the fact is that people, by the way, you talked about miscommunication and everything else. Is there any other reason why you think that you will not be able to deliver on a great customer experience? I'm looking for 1 or 2 points. Anything else? Go ahead. If it takes too long to type, yeah. Maybe fear of the time you will have to commit to your customers. I'm going to actually kind of, what can I say? I'm going to paraphrase this and actually say is sometimes choosing the wrong customer. So what do I mean by that is that there are times that you know that the moment you sign up a customer, you start realizing, oh my God, this is going to be a customer who's going to be hell to please. Sorry for using the word hell. Heck to please, right? Absolutely. Rob, that's exactly what I was saying. Sometimes you are just unlucky with the customer that you get, or you do not think about your segmentation of customers or your segment of customers that you really want to choose from. And when you make that mistake, chances are that you get the wrong customers who have a wrong set of expectations, and then it becomes hell for you to live with. So a lot of times customer experience, it also goes down to your failure to understand who are your customers that you actually want to serve. So that's an excellent point that you say is that's another reason. And another reason that usually happens is why you're not able to deliver on your customers' expectations could be because a lot of times what happens is you might not have enough resources to put into the field to fulfill the needs of the customers. You might not have enough people who are trained. You might not have enough number of people with the right skill set to go out there and deliver the value to the customers. And you could do this because of the fact that you say, you know what, we are going through cost focus. We're not going to provide our people with the right kind of training. And guess what happens? It's the same people with less training. When they go talk to the customers and they deliver that experience to the customers, they are not equipped to deal with it. And that becomes a big issue as well. So all these are some reasons. And again, the key aspect, knowing your customers. What do I want to do in terms of communication patterns? How do I align my KPIs? All of this is ways by which you deliver a great customer experience, but everything is dictated by what is the strategy that we're going to have, right? So that's something that I want you to take away as well, right? So why and what are the challenges, right? Now, when we do this, and this is, I'm going to leave you with the next two slides, and then when we come back to the next class, I will also discuss a little bit more of the next slides on this is, now, I think, Brock, you might have seen this slide. And what we're trying to say is that when we are talking about delivering a great customer experience, right? The idea is a great customer experience. The customers are going to be more satisfied. They're going to be more loyal. The key to a customer being satisfied is whether they feel that they're getting value for what they're paid for. That is what we say is value for the customer. So the customer comes in with certain expectations. Those expectations are met, and they feel that they have got the right value, right? Now, what you need to keep in mind is that every time as an organization which is for profit, right? Or even if it's non-profit, the idea is that you want to at least make enough money to cover your costs. The key is when I'm creating value for the customer, when I'm delivering that great customer experience, as a firm, I also need to understand that I need to do a balancing act, which is I need to make sure that I am making money in the process. So what do you need to do as an organization when I am trying to talk about delivering a great customer experience, when I am trying to manage my relationships with the customers? I have to focus as much on value delivery, that is value for the customer, but I should also make sure that I am making money from that particular customer. That is value of the customer, right? So everything that we talked about earlier, when I asked you the question, why do we deliver a great customer experience? And you answered it essentially, delivering a great customer experience means satisfied customers. Satisfied customers would mean that loyal customers would lead to more profitability, which means that by keeping my customers satisfied, that is value for the customers, I am going to become more profitable. That is a value of the customer. And what you need to understand is that every time I'm creating value for the customer, I am going to create value for the customer. I am incurring costs for myself. If the customer is looking for a great product, I have to spend money to make the great product. If the customer wants great service, I have to spend money to deliver that service. So I want to make sure that when I do that, for every amount of money that I spend on creating value for the customer, does the customer pay enough for us to be profitable? That is what this particular thing. So when I talk about customer experience management, when we talk about customer relationship management, and in one of the last sessions towards the end of the semester, we will again talk about the concept of customer experience management and how it is linked to customer relationship management. But for this class, what you need to understand is that the whole idea of customer relationship management is creating value for the customer, but we need to be creating value for our own organization as well. And so this is pretty much what is one of the key things that I want you to remember is, yeah, we want to deliver a great customer relationship. Yeah, we want to have it, but we also want to do it because we want to be good. We want to be profitable ourselves. We want to create value for ourselves. Okay? Now, from a customer's perspective, this is a typical value equation. So most of you are at least have some experience in sales. What I'm putting out here is Sales 101. This is pretty much what we say in almost every sales class. That is, value is benefits over price, right? Now, if I take a look at Brock, do you remember the discussion we had in our sales management class about this? Or am I asking too much, Brock? Is it too late at night?
I don't know if it's too late at night. I guess maybe I'm confused. Are you showing something?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Were you not able to see it? My PowerPoint slide?
It could just be me. All I see is you.
Can you see this? Guys, can you see my PowerPoint slide? Oh my crap! Wait, let me see.
You've done a hell of a job explaining it, though. I've been following along well.
Oh wow, man! I thought Skype would be easy. Let me see. You know what? Maybe I should do this. Let me try something else. Present desktop. Wait. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, yeah? Guys, I'm so sorry that I should have been presenting my desktop. So let me see. So this is what I wanted to show. Wait. Are you seeing it now?
Yeah, it's loading. Coming through.
So now this is what I said. So this is what I want to show. The value is a dual perspective. So essentially, this is what we say as an organization when I'm talking about delivering a great customer experience. That delivering a great customer experience is going to create value for the customer. But we also discuss why do we want to do this is because we want to create value for ourselves. Now, hopefully everybody can see the slide, right? So now the question is, if I take a look at what is a value for the customer, this is typically the equation that we use. So now, Brock, does it ring a bell from your sales management class?
It looks quite familiar.
Indeed. Even if not, I think, can you try explaining to your colleagues in the class, how would you interpret this?
So I guess the way that I think about it, great, value is customer perception against the benefits, right, being what they're getting out of it and the price they're paying for it. So, if they're not covering the cost, then they don't see any value.
Yeah. So for the others, essentially what you see is that this is a typical example that we show. I mean, this is a typical equation that we show when you go into a sales class. That is, we say value is benefits over price, which is that as far as a customer is concerned, what they're looking for when they come to you as a supplier is what are all the things that I want to get by working with you. So that's the benefit that the customer is looking for. Now, when we start talking a little bit more in detail about value propositions and everything else, I'll spend a little bit more time on what is the difference between a benefit and a need. And what I'm going to tell you right now is a need is something that the customer has. And when you link the needs of the customers to the features of your products and your service, they become benefits. Right? So when you take a look at what is a customer looking for, what they're looking for is all the benefits that they're going to get, but they're going to make a trade-off between, hey, this is all that I'm going to get, but I actually have to pay a price. It's a trade-off between what I'm going to get and what is the price I'm going to pay, right? And essentially, the price can also be translated into the cost of getting those benefits as well, right? So the way a customer is going to take a look at it is that I have two ways of increasing my value. One way of increasing my value could be I increase the benefits, or I can lower my price. In most business-to-business organizations, what's going to happen is that the customer is going to say, I am going to try and increase my value by trying to lower the price. Which means from a sales perspective, what my job is to try and ask myself and convince the customers is, well, can I talk to the customers more about the benefits and get the customer to focus on the benefits a lot more than on the price? So that is pretty much what we try and explain to most salespeople is when the customer is asking for a low price, try to focus much more on the benefits that the customer is going to get. Okay. Now let me ask you this question. What happens if the customer is adamant and says, I do not want to pay a lower price. I say, I don't want to get more benefits. I only want a lower price. Then how do you as a sales firm try and make sure that you have the right kind of value? What is the risk that you run of offering the same benefits but at a lower price?
I think now at that point, you're just going to wind up in a race to the bottom.
Absolutely. You're going to end up in a race to the bottom, but more importantly, you're going to end up with a race to the bottom. You're assuming here that when I lower my price, my competition is going to lower my price because my customer is going to play me with my competition, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But even let's say even if there's no competition, what happens when you're providing the same benefits but you're lowering your price? What happens when I deliver the benefit? What happens to my cost to serve the customer?
Your cost to serve increases, right?
Indeed, your cost to serve
investing more in that relationship and receiving nothing outside of it.
Absolutely, which means my cost to serve to provide that benefit goes up, but the customer is not paying the right price. Again, that's very interesting. So essentially, Bob, when you say you're lowering your value, but are you lowering your value? Maybe you are. You are lowering your value perception because the customer is now going to think, wait a minute, if I can push you down on price, and you're lowering your price, but you're giving me the same benefits, one of two things could happen. One is they could say maybe it's not that valuable in terms of what you're talking about. The benefits that you claim are not as big as you claim they are. So they may start discounting the benefits that they would get. But the worst thing that I've heard happen, and this actually happened for a company that I was doing some training for, was that they were actually selling to a customer, and they had a negotiation, and they would negotiate, and they would make sure that there was a good balance between what was the benefits that the customer got and what is the price that they paid. But what happened was, in this organization, they had a change of buyers, and a new buyer came in, and they started pushing their supplier on price. They said, we want a lower price, and we do not want you to lower the benefits. So what happened, the salesperson that I'm referring to out here made the mistake of offering the same benefits but at a lower price. Guess what happened? Now the buyer says, wait a minute, if you're lowering your price now, for the past 5 years, you have been ripping us off with a higher price for the same benefits. So which means that if you can lower the price now, why didn't you do it for 5 years? Which means that in my next invoice, I am going to take a look at for 5 years where I've paid way too much, and I'm going to reduce that amount plus interest, and I'm going to deduct it in my next invoice. Does it make sense? It should not be making sense, but that's what happened. So you have to be very careful when you do all this, when you talk about the fact that when I'm creating that value, when I'm doing all this, that I should be pricing it in line. And when the customer suddenly says, I do not value the benefits and I want a lower price, then you have one option, that is, I can give it to you, dear customer, at a lower price, but I'm going to be offering less benefits when compared to what you're paying for before. So that is what you need to understand, is that the value that the customer gets is going to depend upon the benefits they're going to get and the price they're going to pay. But you should also keep in mind that if the customer is going to insist on a lower price, you should start asking yourself is, should I be lowering the benefits to that particular customer? Because that equation is based on your value should be, the customer should be paying the right price for the right amount of benefits. And that is what is key out there. Why is that important? It boils down to the fact, as Brock was saying, is that when you're lowering your price, which means that your profitability went down, but if by delivering the same level of service and same level of benefits to my customers, my cost to serve goes up, what happens is your profitability goes down, the customer is going to start expecting more, you are not going to be profitable at all, and that's not going to be in line with what your organization wants. And that is pretty much what we have here. When we say is, we need to understand is that when I create value for my customers, I should be talking in terms of benefits, but what I should also be focusing on is the following. And I'm going to wrap today's session with this, right? Now, this is from your perspective. This is value of the customer. So on the one hand, we talked about value for the customer, which is this. The value the customer is going to get is the benefits they're going to get, and the trade-off is going to be the price they have to pay to get those benefits. Now, where is this linked to this is that when I am delivering all this, when I am delivering the benefits to the customer, from my perspective, value of the customer, every benefit that I deliver to the customer has an impact on my cost to serve. So every benefit is, I have to either produce a great product, which means I have a production cost, I have a logistics cost to make it available to the customers. Or if I have a service, I have to train the people who have to go deliver that service. That is a cost. So every benefit is a cost to serve. That's what you have here. Right? But if you go back to the equation, the customer has to pay a price. So the price is what will help you capture the value, right? So if you've had a class on pricing, you know that price increases have one of the biggest impacts on profitability over and beyond any kind of cost reduction. So what we're looking at is when your cost to serve is going up because of delivering the benefits, you better hope that the value that you capture, the price that you capture, is creating value for you. So the value here is not value for the customer. This is value for your organization. So of course, once you see this, what you're going to have is you're going to have high, low, that is high value capture and a low value capture, and a high cost to serve and a low cost to serve. Does it make sense so far? What's going to happen then is that based on this, you need to start asking yourself is, wait a minute, let's take a look at this quadrant, right? Sorry, I made a mistake. So this is high value capture. This is low value capture. That is, the customer is paying a high price. The customer is paying a low price. And here we have low cost to serve. That is, the customer is not looking for too many benefits. Here, the customer is asking a lot from us, which means my cost to serve goes up, right? So this is low cost to serve, high cost to serve. Is everybody following the cursor here? Or if it's too complicated, what I can actually do in the next class is that I'll actually illustrate it as well. Is everybody following my cursor? Can you just let me know about that?
Yep.
Yeah, great. Okay, good. So what you do is that, yeah, so what you take a look at is, let's take a look at this. So this is low cost to serve. This is high cost to serve. This is the low value capture or a low price the customer pays, and the high price the customer pays. Now, from your perspective, what we need to understand is that when I create value for the customers, I also want to make sure that I'm somewhere here, which is great, right? This is where, again, the customer pays a high price, which means I'm capturing a lot of value here, but my cost to serve is very low. Does it make sense? Which means that this is what I call a honeymoon phase. It does not last. This is a phase where the customer is paying a high price, but in order for you to take care of that customer, it does not cost you a lot. This usually also happens when you are in a monopoly. This is where you have the target. This is where most companies, this is the sweet spot. I call this is a honeymoon. It does not last. But a great equilibrium is reached when you reach the point which is above, directly above the target out there, where it is high cost to serve, but high value capture, which is the customer is paying a high price, but you as a firm also need to spend a lot of money to keep the customer happy. But this is a good equilibrium where you are doing and you're going to great lengths to keep your customers happy, but it's not that the customer is paying less, the customer is paying the right price to match what you're delivering, right? This is what I call heaven. This is where is an ideal point where you need to settle, which means that every time I deliver a great customer experience, I better hope that my cost to serve is balanced with the price or the value that the customer is giving me. So on the right hand side, so if you take a look at the 4 quadrants you have, the bottom right quadrant is what I call a honeymoon, where the cost to serve is low and the customer is paying a high price. On the other hand, if you go one step above that, that's pretty much on the right hand quadrant, the value that the customer is paying, the price that the customer is paying is high, but your cost to serve is also in line because the customer is demanding and you're doing all the efforts to make sure that the benefits that the customer gets matches the price the customer is paying. Where you do not want to be is on the left hand side, right? So let's take a look at the bottom left quadrant, where the way you would interpret that is low value capture, which means the customer is not paying a high price. But that is not a big issue because if you notice on the left side, it is also low cost to serve, which means that we don't have to spend as much money to keep that customer happy. But here you have to be very careful because very quickly, if you are not paying attention, you could end up over servicing the customers and your cost to serve is very quickly going to go up and the customer is not paying a very high price. So this is what I say, I call it a hole. That's something you should be very careful about, right? And the the top left quadrant, that is where we have high cost to serve and high and low value capture. That is what we refer to where the customer gets a lot of benefits but is not paying a high enough price, which means that your cost to take care of the customer usually is much higher than the profitability that you can get from that customer. And that is what I refer to as a hell. Sorry for using the word hell. So essentially the way you would interpret this is that on the left hand side, you have the hell hole. On the right hand side is where you have the heaven and the honeymoon. So where you should ideally be is while I am delivering a great customer experience, while I'm having a great relationship with my customer, that should be reflected in my ability to make money in the process. This is something that I really want you to understand is customer relationship management is not about bending over backwards to help your customers at lower profitability. It is about at least making sure that you have the right amount of profitability by keeping the customers happy and you are making money in the process as well. This is something which is very, very important is why are we doing this? But we are doing this to make our customers happy, but we're also doing this to be profitable ourselves. And this is the one big thing that I want you to understand. And I'm going to leave you with this at this point in time. Questions on this? I apologize for not sharing the desktop earlier, but hopefully that we do not miss too much on that. So questions on what I just said right now. I'll make sure that in the next session I actually even have an illustration. So essentially what we're going to talk about in the next class is I'm going to build up on this and I'm going to start talking a little bit more about what the customer experience is about. Questions? No? Great. So if that is the case, I'm going to wrap it up at this point in time. It's 9:30, so I'm going to have the recording and I'm going to send it across to you. I will also suggest a couple of books that if you're interested, you might want to read or maybe check at Ball State if they have it. But the books that I recommend are going to be great. And I'm going to send you a couple of articles as well on silo busting and ending the war between marketing and sales. I will also be giving you feedback. I plan to grade all of your papers once everybody submitted it and have the grades probably by the end of the week or early next week as well. If there's no other questions, I wish you all a wonderful night and I will see you again next Wednesday, right? And again, I think there's no assignment for there is an assignment for next Wednesday. It's going to be on marketing automation. But anyway, we'll get to that soon. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good evening. And let me make sure that I get all the recordings to you as well.